today. They leave the church, number one, they feel church isn't relevant. The world changes and young people change with it. What's the latest music? I don't know. I don't even care. I don't care what the latest video game is. If I play a video game, I play a video game from 10 years ago, right? But if we're not careful, we become irrelevant. Right? We're thinking mortgages and minivans and keeping the sheep alive and the windstorm. And young people, they know what's going on in the world, right? They know what's going on with culture, what's going on with celebrities. They know all these different things, and they shift and they absorb that culture from the environment around them. We got to stay relevant, right? Number two, they don't feel needed, right? And again, one of the goals is, sometimes there's been a book published, say we can keep them in the church. Well, the goal isn't just to have them sitting in the church. We want them running the church, right? So the goal is too low. We want them to participate, not just be passive, okay? So they don't feel they're needed, right? If they're not there, church still happens without them. And then also sometimes we don't share power. We'll talk about that a little bit. And number three, they don't feel loved. They come to church with some earrings in. Remember when I was in the 90s, I was growing up, I was your age, and I was a rebel. I was a Badventist. There's Adventist. I had an earring. Ooh. And I came home one time with the earring, and I was ready for the fight. I was like, it's my ear, it's my body, I can do whatever I want. I want to be cool, And my mom looked at me, and of course, they can sense things right away. She looked at me, meh, you'll grow out of it. She went back to doing whatever she was doing. And I had it for 2 or 3 years. I had to take it out because I went to a Christian school. I had to take it out at school. Then put it back in to be cool after school. And I forgot it in my pocket several times. Went through the wash, and the little stud would go through the washing machine, and the back of it would be in there. So you'd pull the laundry out. There'd be the back of the earring, right? We'd be sitting there, and then I'd go buy another one. I did that like 3 or 4 times. And I just outgrew it. It's no fight, no big deal, right? But they don't feel loved. They often feel judged. Well, the solution... Again, we're not talking rocket science here, is number one, make church relevant, right? Take feedback from the young people. Make sure, get the young people involved. No one can minister to young people better than someone a couple of years older than them, right? So you have like a 19 to 24-year-old, they're cool still. I used to be cool. And now there's the new cool guy, and I said something about Clayton, like, I don't keep with all these. He's like, oh, no, Dad, you sure don't. I was like, shh, that's enough out of you. But it's true, Anyhow, make sure church is relevant. Get young people involved so they feel needed. Again, they can't leave the church if they're running the church, amen. And make sure they feel loved. And you have to put up with their fads. It's okay. I was crazy then too. My son, I made him cut their hair recently, but he's trying to grow his hair long. I'm like, come on, get a haircut. And then Kodiak, he blackmailed me. He said, Dad, you had long hair when you were my age. I was like, you still need a haircut. Make sure they feel loved, even if their hairdo isn't the style you want or their fashion or whatever, right? Now, just some more good news I want to share with you today. I'm from Alberta. Alberta has enough oil to serve the entire world for like 100 years. We have a lot of oil. That's the good news. The bad news is we got garbage oil. It's tar sands. In Saudi Arabia, you can dig the oil, it's $10 to $15 a barrel. You put a hole in the ground and it comes out nice and black and smooth. In Alberta, it's tar sand, so it's thick and it's in all this sand. So you have to boil that junk out. You have to like put solvents in it to liquefy. You have to heat it up to put it through the pipelines. It's a pain in the neck, but we can do it when oil gets expensive enough. With evangelism, as a church, we tend to focus on the tar sands instead of focusing on the Saudi Arabia oil. Sweet crude, yes, the liquid crude right out of the ground, okay? Here's the truth. And you just think about it. Again, you can be a farmer, teacher, farmer. You can get this, right? Children are the easiest to influence. Most people make a decision for Christ when they're children. So a career church researcher, George Barna, he's retired now. He's done all this research on focusing on pastoral leadership and how the church can reach the culture and all this church stuff. And towards the end of his career, he wrote a book called Transforming Children to Spiritual Champions. And there he said, no, all these years of research, I didn't miss the boat, I missed the ocean. Almost everyone who is a Christian in Western society, they decide between ages 4 and 14. That's when, for your first commitment, not your only commitment, your first commitment to Christ is almost always like these young people between ages 4 and 14. If you don't reach people between ages 4 and 14, chances are you won't reach them. And the ones we do reach as adults, when we do evangelism, right? Which again, we think evangelism, we think of reaching adults. Those adults, almost all of them, have a positive childhood experience. They went to a Pathfinder camporee, they went to Sabbath school, they loved the Bible stories, they went to a Christian school. They have some sort of positive connection to the faith that was there, and that seed lay dormant, and then at the right time, they come and give their hearts to Christ here. But if they don't have a positive memory from their childhood, they won't even be here. I was in Hawaii doing evangelism when I was in seminary, and I know these stats, I've preached these stats, etc. And we were there, and we were doing Bible studies, visiting these young adults that were coming to the church. They were new, they weren't baptized yet. And I love asking people their stories. And she shared her story, how, didn't have any church background. Well, as soon as I hear that, I'm very interested, right? I'm like, oh, really? You never went to church as a kid? No, my family never went to church. My family didn't believe in God. And I started to poke and prod a little bit because I know that'd be like almost miraculous, right? I mean, every conversion is a miracle, but you know what I'm saying? It'd be extremely unique to have zero Christian background. And she said, oh, well, I went to Sunday school with my friend and I loved the Bible stories. And no, I didn't say this on the outside. On the inside, I was like, aha, I knew it, right? It's like a positive childhood experience. And those kids that visit, you might never see them again. But if they're going to come to Christ as an adult, you might have put that seed, that positive childhood memory, right? Children are 8 times more likely to accept Christ than teens for a 12-month period of their life. Remember, kids are kids for 12 years, right? And you're an adult for about 60 years. And they're 40 times more likely than adults. And yet, we really don't focus on evangelism to children. If you believe in science, if you believe in math, when you hear evangelism, you should think children, and specifically young families. Number one, children are the easiest to influence. Ever let a child watch a bad movie? Have a whole new vocab, right? You let it, we should watch bad movies, but you let an adult watch a bad movie, you let David watch a bad movie, he's still going to talk the same, right? But you let some of my kids, right? They get some different ideas. Here's a simplification of the data, okay? Don't want to spend all day up here feeling like you're getting a PhD. Number one, people are most likely to accept Christ for the first time as a child. Now their brain develops. They go from thinking very black and white to thinking abstract. So teenagers can think in abstract in a way a child simply cannot. Okay, more complex thinking, and their view of God gets more complex. And so they basically, in a way, they kind of almost destroy their childhood image of God, the simplistic version, and they have a more advanced view of God as a teenager, and they have to rededicate their lives back to God, because God is so much bigger than they realized He was when they were a kid. Because they can actually think about more of the complexity. And so they recommit their life or confirm their relationship with Christ as teenagers. So you can't ignore the teenagers. Can't just focus on kids, ignore the teenagers. But as we talked earlier, if they're going to leave the church, they leave the church as young adults, especially when they graduate from an Adventist education institution. So you can't ignore the young adults, right? And then if they do come back to church, guess when it is? When they become parents, they want their child in Sabbath school to learn about Jesus. And then, of course, us parents, we have no idea what we're doing because we're like, we didn't come with an owner's manual. That washing machine have an owner's manual. I can look it up, right? We have the Bible, right? But what I'm saying is the older parents already raised kids. They're going to be ones to mentor and coach the young families. And so I want to propose for you today, and I think you're on the right track. Pastor Phil brought me in and said, I want you to help my church go to the next level, is that it's really, the target should be, in North America, young families. And that doesn't mean we ignore any other age group. All age groups are important and vital to God's church. But if we have a target for our outreach and evangelism, it should be young families because of that, right? A guy named Jeffrey Canada went to one of the worst parts of New York, into Harlem, and he wants to do whatever it takes to get these kids out of poverty, right? There's generational poverty. I've worked in it for many years when I was in Michigan, and it is not, there's no easy solution. When you go into a neighborhood, if you go into what you would call the hood, you don't go in there and little quick fixes and government programs don't work. If they did, we wouldn't have the hood anymore, right? And he goes in there, and he made this huge area called the Harlem Children's Zone. And they start with children before they're born. As soon as they find that a mom is pregnant, they start knocking on her door, trying to support her. Healthy diet, healthy exercise, healthy pregnancy, healthy delivery, positive discipline, etc. They get right in there from the fetus stage. And then the healthy babyhood. When I was young, I used to think, it's all, once kids speak English and they understand English, then that matters. No. When they're a baby, that's super important for maturity and development and social skills and intellect. Being able to learn in school in grade 5, it's super important when you're 5 months old, right? You can't skip any of these ages. And so what they did, they had these kids, they got these kids from step 0 up to about grade 5, 6. They graduated from elementary. They were all ahead. Almost all of them were ahead grade level. They're doing as good as the rich kids in the suburbs. And they graduate, and 2 years out of their program, they're right back with their peers in academic failure. And they're like, what? They graduated out of the program, and they went right downhill academically. And they realized we can't have any gaps. If we want these kids to succeed, we have to have a conveyor belt with 0 gaps in it. And they go right from fetus stage, pre-birth, all the way to college graduation. They harass their young people in college. Are you doing your homework? Because that's what a good parent does, right? And all these kids, some of these kids, their parents aren't there to support their college the way we would just take for granted. And so this ministry, this educational program, with Jeffrey Canada, Harlem Children's Zone, they provide that academic nurture, that accountability, that challenge. I'm ready to quit school. No, you're not. No, you're not. Get back in there, hang in there. It's finals. Do your homework. You can relax after finals are over. Okay? And it's conveyor belt with no gaps. As a church, this is what we need. And this is really what the Bible talks about. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go or she should go. Even when they are old, they'll not depart from it. Now, of course, even though you do your best, right? This isn't a statistic that no children will ever leave the church. The point there is, the better we train them up, the more chance we have of them staying close to Christ, staying in the church, and taking over the church as they grow up. So common sense number 1, children are the easiest to influence. Everyone knows that. Number 2, we need a continuous conveyor belt without any gaps. We don't ignore any age group, but like Jeffrey Canada, he starts at pregnancy, right? Not cradle roll, not primary. He starts at pregnancy. And as a church, that is what our strategy should be as well. The follow-up book, after George Barna wrote this book, the follow-up book was not how your church can revolutionize children's ministry. You know what his follow-up book was? Revolutionary parenting. Children are the easiest to influence, and the biggest influence on children, whether we like it or not, whether you have a cool new children's pastor or not, whether you have a great VBS or Pathfinder program, the number 1 influence on children is their parents. And God knew this. According to Jesus, the most important verse in the Bible, and also to the Jews, is called the Shema, right? This is the central verse in the Bible. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Okay? Judaism and Christianity, this is the number 1 verse in the entire Bible. The follow-up verse, verse 6, and these words which I command you today shall be on your heart. Are you ready for verse 7? You shall teach them diligently to your children. I know there's so many things going on here, and I'm in the busiest phase of life because I got the career pressure on, right? And I got the young people and the finances and the repairs and the this and the that, right? You're right in the crunch zone, right, Nathan? Right in the crunch zone. But this is the top priority for parents, and we need your help. It's a pain in the neck raising kids. I love my kids to death. So I'm like, I just want to have a non-interrupted get to sleep in on Sunday morning. You know what I'm saying? Like, I remember when I was young, I didn't appreciate sleep. When I knew Nathan, man, I'd be up late, do whatever I wanted. Now I'm like, I could have gone to bed early. I could have slept in whenever I wanted to. What's wrong with me, right? But even though it's challenging, parents need our help. We need to come together as a community and help parents teach God's word diligently to the children, not haphazardly, not priority number 3, but priority number 1. Priority number 1. And check this out. God just makes sure, and he's not talking about going to the temple. And going to the temple is important. Jesus went to the temple, right? They had the whole temple worship service, and kids could observe that. That was very important. The most important thing was this. Parents, talk about God's love when you sit in your house, when you walk by the road, when you lie down, when you rise up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and by them on your foreheads. Of course, your actions represents your thoughts, right? Your foreheads represent your thoughts. Write them on your door frames of your houses and on your gates. Now, some of my Jewish friends, right, you go to their house, you see they're Jewish, they have a little steel thing on their door frame, right? They'll have a little steel box with a Bible verse inside. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Well, that's not really what God's talking about. God's talking about being a Christian your entire life. That's what the kids come to church, they hear from the pastor, then they go home, they see how you live. That's what matters more, right? And again, the families need our support, and they're looking for it, right? We think we have it all figured out. Then you have kids, you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Please help. One of my biggest mentors, one of the reasons I'm a children's pastor, is Bill Wilson. Like Jeffrey Canada also works in New York, and he goes into the worst neighborhoods in New York City and works with kids there. And he works with them by the thousands. In fact, he is now, this is when he was younger. He's actually quite old. He's got to be in his 70s now. And his ministry reaches over 100,000 kids a week. 100,000 kids a week. Now, do you think this guy here is the best children's pastor in the world? Do you guys know anyone who reaches more than 100,000 kids a week? I don't. Well, he's not the best children's pastor in the world. You know who the best children's pastor in the world is? Mom and dad having family worship at home. These are the biggest life changes. And he's in New York, and I've worked in the hood, right? I've followed his model. It's hard because you reach these kids. They come to church, right? They learn what Jesus said, and they go right back into the hood, right? And if they don't come from a Christian home, it is so hard to have long-term results from that. The kids will come to church, and then they'll walk right out the door when they're teenagers, right? But if mom and dad are on board, now you have power. Now you see life change when you come together, the church and the family together. And that is why I think our top priority comes to evangelism should be reaching young families. Young families having a big emphasis on this. Number one, children are the easiest to influence. Number two, we need a conveyor belt, continuous conveyor belt with no gaps. Number three, pastors are the best kids pastors. You're a small church, you're not going to hire a kids pastor like me. All right, you don't even have Pastor Phil here full time. He's even here today, right? He has 2 churches or 3? 2? Okay, so you have him part of the time, right? So you're not going to hire a children's pastor. I know that, but you already have children's pastors. Your parents are your children's pastors. We want to make sure that we're supporting them on our budget and our NOMCOM, our nominating committee. Something that my church has done right, that I'm just finishing up there. Next week's will be my last week with Church in the Valley, and they grew 20 years ago. That was my first job out of college in 2002. They're about 250 members. Well, now they're 980 members. And yes, it's been hard work, it's been a lot of prayer, etc. One of the things they've done is they've targeted young families. And on their budget, when our senior pastor was with us for 20 years, he just moved to be conference president in Upper Columbia Conference. When he left, his parting gift is he made sure each Sabbath school had a big fat bonus, about $1,500. Now that's a big church with a bigger budget, I get it, but the priority was there. The 2 things my church has always prioritized is young people. We put our money where our mouth is. We staff the young people place, and they have the money, and they have the people. So when nominating committee comes, Pastor Dave, every year he'd call me, say, Walter, I'm going to start NOMCOM in 2 months. You call all your volunteers first. And you get your Sabbath school leaders first, your adventurers, your pathfinders first. Then we'll figure out who the elders are second. You see that? It's a strategic partnership. The kids don't come last, they come first. Well, everybody says kids come first. What does that mean in the real world? That means on the budget, the last place you cut is the kids ministry, not the first place. When nominating committee comes around, the first place you staff is the kids. Us adults will take care of ourselves, amen? We can figure this out. If the best